It began with silence. Not the kind that follows sleep, but the kind that makes the air feel heavy, wrong. At 9:42 a.m. on a bright June morning, Megan Harper called her mother's name from the kitchen door, then froze. The back gate swung open. The sandbox was empty. Jacob's red bucket lay on its side, spilling wet sand like blood into the grass. Lily's stuffed bunny sat abandoned on the porch step. 2 children had been there minutes ago. Now, they were gone. The air felt still, the kind of stillness that means something terrible has already happened. Maple County, Ohio, was the sort of place where people left doors unlocked and neighbors waved from tractors. Megan had driven the kids to her parents' farmhouse at Willow Bend the night before, just as she did every weekend. Her mother watched them while Megan worked a shift at the diner. It was supposed to be safe. That morning, she'd stepped inside for coffee, no more than 3 minutes, maybe less. When she returned, Jacob and Lily were gone. No footprints, no noise, just the faint hum of cicadas rising from the cornfield. The first call went to 911. "My children are missing," Megan said, her voice breaking. Within an hour, Sheriff Don Rucker arrived with deputies and volunteers. They searched the yard, the barn, the creek behind the property. Dogs picked up a scent leading to the gravel road, and then nothing. As dusk fell, police lights painted the old farmhouse blue and red. Reporters gathered by the fence. Rucker faced the cameras, hat in hand. "We are treating this as a missing persons case," he said. His voice was steady, but his eyes told another story: fear. By day 2, the search had expanded across a 10-mile radius. Helicopters circled overhead. Hundreds of volunteers combed fields and ditches. They found small things: a shoe print too small to matter, a ribbon tangled in brush, a footprint near the creek that vanished in mud. Megan refused to leave the property. She sat on the porch clutching Lily's stuffed rabbit, her eyes vacant. "They'll come back," she whispered to no one. Sheriff Rucker placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "We'll find them." But deep down, he knew time was already slipping through their hands. Neighbors offered theories. Maybe they wandered off. Maybe someone took them. The Harpers were known, respected, church-going, kind. But whispers soon found their way into every conversation. Some said Megan had left them alone too long. Others pointed to her estranged husband, Daniel, who'd left 6 months earlier. "He was angry," one local said. "Said she'd pay for taking the kids." Detectives brought him in for questioning. He denied everything. "I'd never hurt my children," he said, tears welling. Polygraph inconclusive. No witnesses. No ransom. Just 2 names printed on missing posters, tacked to every lamppost in Willow Bend. Days became weeks. The farmhouse felt frozen in time. Children's drawings still taped to the fridge. Toys scattered where they'd been left. Megan stopped sleeping. She sat by the window through the nights, waiting for headlights to turn up the drive. Maybe someone just got lost, she told herself. But the police had found no trace, no scent, no lead. "It's like they vanished into thin air," Deputy Laird muttered during the 5th search. Sheriff Rucker frowned. "Nobody vanishes. Somebody knows." He looked toward the cornfield, golden under the sun, endless and silent. Summer turned to fall. The case drew national attention. 2 siblings, 4 and 2, missing without a trace. Television trucks lined the rural road for weeks. The story played nightly. The Willow Bend mystery. America watched, waiting for a miracle. Megan appeared on camera once, her face hollow. "Please," she begged. "If anyone has them, bring my babies home." The footage replayed for days. But tips soon dried up. A truck seen near the farmhouse turned out to be a local delivery van. A neighbor's security tape showed nothing but swaying trees. The silence deepened. By winter, the official search was over. The sheriff held one last press conference. "All physical leads have been exhausted," he said, voice heavy. Behind him, 2 easels held enlarged photos of Jacob and Lily. Snow began to fall as he spoke, soft and merciless. Megan collapsed against her father's shoulder. Reporters packed up their gear. The cameras left, but the questions stayed. Sometimes, Sheriff Rucker told a deputy later, evil wears an ordinary face. He stared across the frozen field, where the children's laughter had once carried on the wind. For years, the Harper case lingered in the background of Ohio's unsolved files. Every few months, a new tip arrived, a sighting at a rest stop, a rumor from another state. All dead ends. Megan moved away in 2006, unable to bear the stares. Her parents stayed behind, keeping the house at Willow Bend like a shrine. Birthdays came and went, with candles lit but never blown out. The world moved on. The farmhouse didn't. Its porch sagged, its paint peeled, but inside, 2 small rooms remained untouched. Jacob's train set still waiting for tracks to move. Sheriff Rucker retired in 2010. Before clearing his office, he pulled the Harper file from the shelf, thumbed through the yellowed pages, and sighed. "I failed them," he whispered. He placed a sticky note on the front. "Revisit if DNA tech advances." Then he locked the drawer and handed over his badge. New sheriffs came. New crimes filled the blotters. But Jacob and Lily stayed frozen in time, 2 faces on a wall of the lost, 2 smiles that had never faded in memory. 2 decades later, in 2024, Detective Claire Monroe reopened the case as part of a statewide DNA backlog project. "Start with the kids," she told her team. "We owe them that." The old evidence box arrived from storage plastic bags, labeled creek sample, shoe fragment, fiber from swing rope. Most of it degraded. But one piece stood out. A hair sample lifted from Lily's stuffed bunny, preserved better than anyone expected. Monroe ordered a full genomic scan, hoping modern tech might find what 2004 couldn't. Results came back 6 weeks later. The report noted a secondary DNA profile, male, partial, not belonging to any family member. "We've got something," Monroe said. They ran it through CODIS. A match popped up. The name hit like a cold slap. Earl Watterson, convicted burglar, recently paroled. He'd been a handyman in the area in 2004, worked maintenance for several farms, including the property next to Willow Bend. At the time, no one had linked him to the Harpers. He'd moved out of state within months of the disappearance. Monroe tracked him down in Missouri, living in a small trailer park. She brought a local officer for backup. Watterson opened the door, gray-haired now, oxygen tank hissing softly beside him. "I've been waiting for this," he said before she even spoke. "It's about the kids, isn't it?" Monroe didn't answer. She handed him a photo of Jacob and Lily. His eyes lingered, then closed. "You found them yet?" he asked quietly. The question sent a chill down her spine. "Not yet," she said, "but we're getting close." At first, Watterson denied everything. Then, under the weight of DNA evidence, he broke. "I didn't mean for it to happen," he muttered. He'd been fixing a fence for the Harpers' neighbors. "Saw the kids playing near the gate. They waved at me," he said. He lured them with candy, took them toward the creek, intending just to talk. His story fractured with every breath. They cried. I panicked. Monroe sat in silence, recorder running. "Where are they now, Earl?" she asked softly. His eyes filled with tears. "Still there," he whispered. "By the house." Search teams returned to Willow Bend for the first time in 20 years. The house stood empty, vines swallowing the porch rails. Detectives marked off the yard, focusing near the creek. It took less than a day. A cadaver dog stopped by an old maple tree, paws trembling. Beneath a few feet of earth, they uncovered the first small bones, 2 sets, side by side, wrapped in what used to be a blanket. The coroner's voice cracked over the radio. "We've found them!" Silence fell across the scene, broken only by the sound of distant thunder. News spread fast. Cold case solved. Remains of Jacob and Lily Harper found after 20 years. Reporters returned, older now, voices softer. Megan Harper, gray at the temples, came back to Willow Bend. She stood by the tree, a hand pressed to her heart. "I always knew they were close," she whispered. Detective Monroe approached quietly. "We'll make sure he never hurts anyone again." Megan nodded, eyes fixed on the earth. "He already has," she said, "for 20 years. Earl Watterson was charged with 2 counts of murder. He pled guilty, sparing a trial. "I see their faces every night," he said during sentencing. The judge's voice was steady. "You took 2 innocent lives and left a family in torment. You'll die in prison." As the gavel fell, the courtroom remained silent. Megan sat in the front row, clutching a small wooden box. The coroner had given her 2 bracelets recovered with the remains. One pink, one blue. She held them as if they were still warm. The official report called it closure. But closure doesn't sound like crying in the car afterward, or the way Megan's hands trembled lighting candles at the grave. The headstone read simply, Jacob Harper, 2000, 2004. Lily Harper, 2002, 2004. Beneath, an inscription chosen by their grandfather. Forever playing, forever home. The wind moved softly through the grass. 20 years of questions had ended in truth, but truth, as Monroe thought, doesn't heal, it only settles. When the farmhouse was finally sold, the new owners tore down the old fence by the creek. They found rusted tools, fragments of toys, and a single photograph sealed in a jar. Jacob and Lily sitting on the porch, smiling. The handwriting on the back read, "Keep them safe." No one could explain how it got there. Some said it was their grandmother. Others thought Megan buried it herself long ago. Either way, it stayed with the file, a quiet artifact of hope and grief intertwined. Detective Monroe filed her final report in spring 2025. She looked at the children's photo one last time before closing the folder. "You're home now," she whispered. Outside, rain began to fall, gentle against the office window. Somewhere in rural Ohio, the house at Willow Bend stood quiet again, its secrets unearthed, its silence finally explained. 20 years late, but not forgotten, Jacob and Lily Harper had been found, and their story, at last, could rest. The trial ended, but the story didn't. For weeks after Earl Watterson's conviction, the small town of Willow Bend existed in a strange, quiet half-relief, half-mourning. Reporters left, court transcripts were filed, but the locals still spoke in hushed tones. "Do you remember where you were that summer?" people asked each other, as though sharing a collective dream. The Harper house remained empty, the yard overgrown. On the kitchen wall, faint outlines of photographs, still marked where family pictures once hung, small ghosts of a time that no one could return to. Detective Claire Monroe stayed in Ohio longer than she'd planned. The Harper case had become more than another file, it was a promise kept. She returned to Willow Bend one final morning to deliver the last of the personal effects. Megan Harper met her at the church steps, quiet but steady. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. Monroe shook her head. "You already did by not giving up." They sat for a long moment, saying little. Sometimes words are too small for what time takes from us. In town, life continued, but slowly. The diner where Megan once worked hung a framed photo of Jacob and Lily near the register. "Always remembered," the handwritten note beneath read. Locals still left small flowers at the base of the maple tree where the children had been found. Truck drivers stopped, removed their caps, and stood in silence before moving on. It became part of the town's rhythm, an unspoken vow that some losses never truly fade, they just become part of the landscape. Sheriff Don Rucker, long retired, watched the news from his recliner the day the discovery aired. "Took 20 years, he muttered, eyes misting. His wife placed a hand over his. "You did what you could. she said softly. He shook his head, but not enough. That night, he wrote a letter to Detective Monroe, thanking her for finishing what he started. Every case has a voice, he wrote. Some just take longer to speak. He mailed it the next morning, then returned to his porch to watch the sunrise break over the quiet fields. Reporters followed Monroe for interviews, but she declined most. The story isn't mine, she told one outlet. It belongs to the Harpers and to every detective who carried that file when no one else cared. Her department called her work a triumph of persistence and technology. She called it something else, grace. Technology gives us evidence, she said, but people give us closure. The quote appeared in newspapers across the state. It was simple, but it said everything about why she joined the Bureau in the first place. When spring came, Megan began visiting schools to speak about child safety. Her voice trembled at first, but grew stronger with each story she told. Listen to your instincts, she said to the parents gathered in gymnasiums, and hold them tight while you can. After each talk, someone would approach her quietly, a mother, a teacher, a neighbor, and say, I remember the Harpers. She'd nod, grateful and sad. The children's names had become more than tragedy. They were a reminder of how fragile and precious an ordinary day can be. In the county courthouse, the Harper file now rests in a glass case labeled Case Closed, 2004-2024. Inside are the original missing posters, a photo of the farmhouse, and the 2 bracelets recovered with the remains. Visitors sometimes stop to read the captions, whispering to one another. I remember seeing that on the news, someone might say. The display isn't for spectacle, it's for memory. Each item carries a weight that paper can't describe, a quiet echo of voices too young to have spoken for themselves. A year after the case closed, Willow Bend held a memorial at the town square. The mayor spoke briefly, then stepped aside. Megan took the podium, holding a folded sheet of paper she never looked at. For a long time, I thought love meant holding on, she said. But I've learned love can also mean letting go. Her words trembled, but didn't break. When the crowd bowed their heads, wind moved through the oak branches overhead, scattering petals across the stone walkway, soft reminders that some endings carry their own kind of peace. Detective Monroe attended the service quietly from the back. When it ended, she walked to the edge of the crowd and placed 2 small wooden cars she'd found in the evidence box at the foot of the memorial. For the road home, she whispered. The gesture wasn't in any report, but those who saw it never forgot. Later, someone painted the words "Forever Loved" onto the base of the stone. The town didn't know who did it, but no one ever covered it up. Time smoothed the roughest edges. The farmhouse at Willow Bend was sold again, renovated, and finally lived in. The new family planted flowers near the old maple tree, unaware, or perhaps unwilling to ask about its history. Life, as it always does, continued. But those who knew still slowed their cars when they passed, glancing toward the window where the curtains once swayed, remembering the story that had shaped a generation of small-town faith in justice and resilience. Detective Monroe moved on to other cases, but the Harper file followed her like a quiet shadow. In training seminars, she spoke of it often, not the crime, but the patience it required. You won't always get the answers right away, she told new recruits, but keep the file open in your heart. Someday, someone will find what you missed. It became a kind of unofficial motto at the Bureau. Every new detective left the room understanding that justice has its own clock, and it never stops ticking. Megan Harper eventually remarried. Her new husband, a quiet carpenter from Toledo, built birdhouses in the backyard. For them, she said once, watching sparrows dart in and out of the small wooden frames. On anniversaries, she still visited the grave. Some years she brought flowers, some years only silence. You would have been grown now, she whispered once, tracing Jacob's name. Maybe playing baseball. Maybe teaching your sister to read. She smiled softly. I like to think you did anyway somewhere better. Earl Watterson died in prison 2 years into his sentence. The warden called Monroe personally. He never asked for forgiveness, he said. But he stopped sleeping weeks before the end. Monroe thanked him, hung up, and stared at the cold case wall in her office. She didn't feel triumph, only stillness. Justice wasn't about winning. It was about balance, about setting something right so the world could breathe again. And finally, after 2 decades, it did. Local students now learn about the Harper case in a course on modern forensics. The professor uses it as an example of how DNA evidence revolutionized investigation. But she always ends with a softer point. Science found the answer, she tells her class, but compassion carried it there. She clicks to the final slide, 2 smiling children in a sunlit yard. The room always falls silent. For a moment, no one moves. It's the kind of silence that feels sacred, like respect taking form. A podcast later covered the case under the title The Willow Bend Children. It wasn't sensationalized. The host spoke slowly, with reverence, ending each episode by reading the children's names. Thousands of listeners wrote letters afterward. I held my kids tighter after hearing this, one mother said. Another wrote, I remembered my own brother who disappeared in 1978. Thank you for giving them a voice. Even through the digital noise of the modern world, their story continued to touch hearts that beat far beyond Ohio. Sheriff Rucker passed away the following spring. At his funeral, Monroe delivered the eulogy. He carried the file longer than anyone, she said. He didn't live to see it solved, but he never stopped believing it could be. After the service, she placed her badge on his coffin for a moment, just long enough for the light to catch its edge. We finished it, she whispered. Then she walked away, knowing that some debts between generations are finally paid, not in words, but in action. Years rolled forward. Children born long after 2004 grew up hearing the Harper story as legend. Parents told them not to wander far. Teachers reminded them that the world can change in a heartbeat. But there was comfort, too, in knowing that even after 20 years, people still cared enough to keep searching. That care became part of the town's DNA, a living testament that the smallest lives can leave the largest echoes. Monroe retired quietly in 2035. She kept one memento from her years on the force, the photograph of Jacob and Lily, sunlit and unposed, smiling at something beyond the frame. It hung on her study wall, framed in oak. On quiet mornings, she'd sit by the window, coffee in hand, and watch the light shift across it. We found you, she would think, though she never said it aloud. The photo, after all, had already answered. Every spring, the town of Willow Bend still holds a candlelight vigil by the creek. No speeches now, just music, soft and steady. The candles float downstream, their reflections breaking gently on the water. Somewhere among them, people imagine, are 2 lights that always stay together. Jacob and Lily, the pastor says each year, remind us that truth may sleep, but it never dies. The crowd nods, and the river carries the light into darkness, glowing faintly long after the night grows still. And so the story of Willow Bend settled into memory, not as a tragedy alone, but as proof that even buried truth will one day rise. The farmhouse, the field, the maple tree all remain part of a landscape that remembers. Justice came late, but it came. Love endured longer. When the wind moves through the corn at dusk, some say you can still hear laughter soft, distant, and free. It isn't sorrow anymore. It's peace.